So yesterday, Brian Moore wrapped up the conference with the one-word description: authenticity. Presenters spoke from their heart. Our next presenter embodies this characteristic. Tracey Massey is the president of Americas for the Mars Wrigley Company, where she's been working for nearly 30 years. As the first female in this position, she is responsible for leading strategy, sales, operations in North and Latin America for the world's largest manufacturer of chocolate, confections, gum, and mint. As a curious STEM student, her mom pushed her to enroll in an elite church school. She was the first in her family to go to college and earned a degree in chemical engineering, which led her to her first job at Mars. With the encouragement of managers who recognized Tracey's unique abilities, she gained experience from the company, including Europe and the US, beverage, confectionery, pet care, and from plant manufacturing to finance, where she was the global CFO, to now in her position as president. Tracey's experience is broad and deep. Under her leadership, Mars is actively planning their strategy to ensure that their brand endures for another 100 years, which includes an investment of $1 billion in their sustainable in a generation plan to tackle urgent threats facing their business and society, including climate change, poverty, and the scarcity of resources. Let's welcome Tracey Massey.
Thank you.
So Tracy, you said that you owe your success to three characteristics: curiosity, adaptability, and fearlessness. I'd like to just to have a conversation about your professional journey and how these characteristics have shaped your success.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting listening to Jim earlier. Some of the things that happen to you as a child is what shapes you as a leader and then helps you give back when you're in these jobs. But so at 11 years old, my mother asked me to test into this school. I lived in central London. We were very poor. And I had to travel halfway across London to go to school. So I used to take my blazer off, put it in my bag, as if I had it on, I would get beaten up. Go under the underpass, take 2 tubes to the other side, then put my blazer back on, because if I didn't have it on, I would have detention. And I think those sorts of things shape you a lot. You know, having a mother that believed in me, having teachers that believed in me and pushed me to do things that I never thought I could do. At 11, I had no clue. And if those people hadn't believed in me and pushed me, then I wouldn't be here today. So I owe a lot of everything to them. And I would say to anybody with children, which most of you probably have, or anybody, particularly with women that work for you, if you don't push them, they probably won't step up and go for it. And that's where some of the fearlessness comes from. So I'll tell you a story. So I was an engineer. I started in manufacturing, did about 2 years, and then I moved into finance. I had no clue about finance. Couldn't even do debits and credits. Didn't know what I was talking about. But I managed to convince someone to give me a chance. And that's one of the reasons I stayed for Mars for nearly 30 years, is they take chances on people. We can teach you your subject. We can't teach you learning agility and humanity and leadership. We can teach leadership, but a lot of it's innate. So I did finance about 10 years, and I moved across to the US. I was working in pet care and finance, and my dream job was always to be a plant manager. And I got the opportunity. Again, I don't think anybody other than Mars would have allowed me to do that. I had no qualifications whatsoever to go run a factory. I mean, there's just no way. Had an engineering degree and 2 years experience. But they moved me down to South Carolina, where it's largely a leadership challenge. And I remember sitting at the breakfast table with my family. I'd moved my 3 children, my husband, to South Carolina from California, which was lovely. And I sat at the breakfast table, I was like, what have I done? I can't do this. I've talked myself into this job. I can't do this. I have no qualifications to be able to do this job. And the fear in that moment was pretty stark. But you know what? I had a fantastic team. They knew more than I knew, and I didn't need to know, because they knew all of the details. And that was probably the best job I ever did. I achieved my career goal 15 years ago. And here I am today. But I think, my big advice is, you don't always know what you don't know. So when I took this job, I shared this yesterday, when I took this job 5 years ago, I was a successful CFO, and that's what I wanted to be. And I had no interest at all in running a business, none whatsoever. And my boss at the time tried to convince me to take the US business job because it needed a turnaround, and he was convinced I was the right person to do it. I said no 5 times before I finally did it as a favor to him. And it's the best job I've ever had. And having managers like that know you better than you know yourself, that push you to do things that you never think you can do, you'd be surprised just what you can achieve. So I've got a lot of thanks to various people through my career that pushed me and have enabled me to grow. And as a return, I try and push other people back. So that's probably.
Yeah, we talked about Sheryl Sandberg, encouraging women to lean in, and you agreed with her, but you also spent time talking about how you need to push and kind of that shove, to get to that next step.
Yeah.
And so you do continue to push on your managers and yourself.
Yeah, and I would say, there's the science, the statistics behind it. Women, if there's a job description that says there's 10 requirements, women think they need all 10 before they'll put their hand up for their job. Men probably need 2. And I'm not saying this to be funny. I'm just saying, just know that women need more of a push. If you've got 7 or 8, you're probably going for the wrong job. You don't want to have 10. You want to have 7 or 8 because then you're pushing yourself. But just know your people well, and it doesn't have to be men or women. It can be introverts and extroverts. But sometimes people just need a bit more of a push. And if you know them really well, then you can help them take that step into the unknown, which is a little bit scary.
Yeah, we've been talking. We had a women's forum yesterday. There's about 30 of us, maybe 40, in the room, and we talked about the role of women in leadership and women in business. And when you joined Mars, it was in the 90s, and there weren't a lot of women in the workforce. Now, while there's more women in the workforce, there's still only 4% of CEOs. You've become a voice of diversity and for gender and race. Was this always the case?
No, it wasn't. I'm ashamed to say, actually, it wasn't. Because of sort of my upbringing and the fact that, I always sort of wanted to be one of the guys. When I took an engineering degree, there were 3 women in a class of 70. I never wanted to be treated differently. I always wanted to earn everything on my own merits. And as a result, earlier in my career, I didn't really see the value of women's groups. It felt like it was a bit whiny and a bit, just get up there, get on with it, and go get yourself a job. So I didn't partake in those things. And as I got further on in my career, I realized the difference that you can make as a female leader, because people need to see that they can be there. And it was said earlier, you need to see it to be it. And that's really, really important. So now I do an awful lot more of talking to women's groups within the company, outside of the company, just encouraging people, just telling the story that, I was too scared to get this job. I didn't want this job. And people look at you and say, oh, you're running a $1 billion business, 10,000 people, 18 factories, you look so No, I'm not confident, but somebody has had confidence in me and pushed me. And I think when you can be honest and tell your stories of the times when you were nervous, it makes it okay for other people to say, all right, maybe I don't have complete confidence I can do this, but I'll take a chance. And one of the things that really changed me in terms of this was I listened to Gina Davis. She was an actress in the baseball film A League of Their Own. And she talks a lot about diversity. When she had her children, she realized that when they were watching TV growing up, there was massive unconscious bias in the programs they were watching. Sesame Street, SpongeBob SquarePants, all male characters. The fact that there's 50% women in the world, all male characters, that most of the heroes in movies were men, and just this unconscious bias in movies that and I had it, I didn't even realize. She talks about the fact that the amount of girls taking archery tripled after Hunger Games. When women scientists were in CSI, the applications for women in those right. jobs went up 4-fold. So that was, for me, a big unlocker of that unconscious bias. I didn't realize that just growing up, these things just happen. In many movies, 80% of the actors in the crowd were men. And, again, it's 50-50. So there's just this unconscious bias, and I think it just behooves us, and that's why I do a lot of it now, and I feel a bit ashamed that it took me so long to do it. But just sharing the story and encouraging people to step in makes a big difference.
Yeah, the unconscious bias in movies and advertising hasn't gone away. So do you think that, are you finding that more women who are entering the workforce are looking for a woman at the top, a role model that they can aspire to be?
I think it works for women. I think it works for diversity of thought. I think it works for diversity of color. You need to feel comfortable where you are. You need to feel like you can be you in a workplace. And for women, yes, definitely. We set ourselves a big goal a number of years ago to get to 50% female. We have 42% women in leadership positions now in our business, which is much, much higher than the norm. And I do believe a lot of it is because people can look up and see, yeah, I can make it. Doesn't mean to say you're going to, but in this company, it's possible. And it goes for extroverts and introverts, it goes for race, it goes for ethnicity, it goes for sexual orientation, it goes for everything. You have to feel comfortable at work that you can say what you think and you can be who you are. And that then makes people take risks and be successful.
So 42% is an amazing achievement. What do you do to attract, develop, and retain great talent and diverse talent?
Yeah, I've been at Mars for nearly 30 years because that's what Mars does. We are a privately held company, family owned. We can think for the long term, but most of all, we can take risks. And like I said, people took risks on me throughout my career. And the more you move around, the more you change function, the more you develop a learning agility. So we very much encourage people. It's okay if you want to stay and be an expert in your field. That's fine. We'll develop you there. But if you really want to develop into a well-rounded senior business leader, then you need to try different things. You need to go across different functions. You need to try different businesses, because that's the only way you develop the experience to then, have a better feel about what to do. So Mars puts a deliberate emphasis on investing in people and developing people and taking risks on people. And that, honestly, I think is the best way. And getting to know your people, like you know your children, you know your family, you know what matters to them, you know what their goals are. If you get to know your people in the same way, then that's the only real way you can develop them. What scares them? What are they proud of? All those things help you develop people to succeed.
Excellent. I'm going to shift on you a little bit. Mars is a 100-year-old family-owned private business with 5 established core values, and we talked about how these core values go back to the early days: quality, responsibility, and efficiency. And then there's mutuality and freedom, which are rather uncommon. And so I'm curious as to how they show up for you and how you apply them in your leadership and throughout the company in your decision-making and influence of your teams.
Yeah, the values are our family's values, and they've been around for years. And it's a lot of the reasons why when people join us, they say they joined us. They look at our values and they say, yeah, I can identify with that. Mutuality is probably the one that's closest to conscious capitalism. And what we say is a mutual benefit is a shared benefit, and only a shared benefit will endure, which means if you don't do business with everybody from all the way down your supply chain to your customers, your retailers, and your consumers, if it doesn't work for everybody, then you don't have a long-term business. So we've been in business 100 years. For the next 100 years, we have to create mutuality of benefit. So we have to, you talked about our Sustainable in Generation pledge, we have to make sure farmers who farm cocoa and small holdings in Africa can make enough money to support their families. Otherwise, guess what? Their children don't become farmers, and then the cocoa supply dries up. So you have to be able to make it work for everybody. And if it doesn't, then business normally falls over. So mutuality is a big one. Freedom's the other one because we are private. There's 100,000 associates in Mars. It's a $35 billion business. Our shareholders take very little dividends out and put most of it back into the business, which enables us to take a long-term view and pledge to help fix poverty and some of these things. We can't do everything, but by standing up, we can encourage others to stand with us, and only together will industry solve some of these massive, massive problems. And the freedom principle says, we need freedom to shape our future, and we need profit to remain free. So it goes to a lot of what you guys have been saying. We have to make money, otherwise we won't exist as a business. And then that enables us to have the freedom to take a long-term view and to think 30, 40, 50 years out. When I'm investing money in cocoa sustainability, that is not going to help me and my business. That's not going to help my bonuses. It's not going to help my business's returns in the next 5 years, but it will leave a business in the next 50 years because we're doing the right things all the way through the value chain.
Mark, when you talk about your sustainable in a generation, and you mentioned that you're focused on a healthy planet, thriving people, nourishing well-being, 100 years is a seriously long-range strategy. And these are really big issues. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're getting the industries and working with government to work with you to achieve these goals?
Partly it's about standing up and making those pledges. I can remember being a CFO back in 2009, 2010, and my boss at the time, who was running the global chocolate business, was like, we're going to make a pledge to be 100% sustainable in cocoa. And I was like, whoa, it's going to cost a lot of money. And how are we going to do that? And we didn't always know, but by leaning out, you get everybody else to come with you. Our goal for the Thriving People is to make a meaningful change in a million people's lives in terms of their living. And we do that through cocoa farmers by helping them farm better, teaching them our science, teaching them agricultural practices so that they can earn money for themselves. And by doing that, we can increase their yields 3-4 times. Now, they still don't earn a lot of money. And for some of these families, they're existing on $100 a week. And it's not a lot of money, but if you can increase that fourfold, you can improve their lives fourfold. And then you have to keep taking the steps one at a time.
And we were talking about your objectives to continue your operations in the United States and how you are focused on building the community.
Yeah, so we have 18 factories in the Americas, confectionery factories. We have over 30 in the US across all of our businesses. We have a very big pet care business. And in each of our factories, they're very involved in their local community. We believe permanently that you should manufacture in the communities where you live and work. So we make money by operating in the United States. We should give back to the communities and have our factories in the United States. We can't do that in every country in the world if we don't sell enough. Obviously, you need a certain amount of sales to make a factory work. But wherever we can, we like to put our factories where we make, where we make our money. And a lot of our associates give back. So we have people go back into the community and work. We even send people over to Africa to help and do those sorts of things. But over the last 5 years, we've invested $1 billion in American manufacturing and created 1,000 jobs. And that's really, really important to us. It's also important to our consumers. So 75% of millennials want to buy American-made product. But it's by doing the right thing and by creating jobs in your local community that you can then help and be sustainable. So that's very much our belief. We are a manufacturing company, and we're proud of it. And if you think about what we do and the work that our associates do in the communities, I think that's one of the reasons why people stay with us for a long time. We have third generations in our factories. And for me, there's nothing that speaks more to a company than when you let your own child work there. You raise these children, you send them out to work, and you hope they work for somebody like Jim Ailing and Tom's Shoes, right? That's who you hope they get to work for. But you can't guarantee it. So when people bring their children to work for them in the third generation, that tells us we're doing the right things.
So do you aspire to be CEO?
You know what? I don't know. I sort of feel like I'm CEO now, really. The good thing about Mars is it's very decentralized. Mm-hmm. So we have a very small corporate office, and they let us run our businesses. So we get to make most of the decisions, and we get to listen to our people and get them to make the decisions. It's one of the reasons I think we're successful, because people take risks and can do what they need to do because we're very decentralized. So I feel like this is my business. It's not, clearly. But the way I run it in line with the 5 principles, I feel like it's mine. So I think you always want to progress on and do more. But what I really want to do is do the best I can do for the 10,000 people that work in my business and their families, and the amount of farmers that we touch. So I like what I do.
Yeah, and as you as you work with your teams and build out the business, and the business is just doing so incredibly well. What do you want your legacy to be?
It's hard. I would want my legacy to be for people in the organization to change their lives, for people in the organization to say, she took a risk on me, and therefore I took a risk on 10 other people, and those 10 other people took a risk on 10 other people, that I was, I made a difference in their lives. You heard Trudy talk about that family that made a difference in their lives, that you've touched enough people and made a difference in their lives that they have become the best they could be. And you can only get that by people telling you that, I guess, and most of the time they don't. You just have to have faith that they've all moved on and paid it back. That for me is what's important.
Tracy, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Welcome.